Welcome back. Find a comfortable position and let your body get heavy. Take a slow breath in and let it out. There's nothing you need to do right now. No way you need to be. Tonight, I have 12 stories for you. Let them wash over you. You don't need to follow along closely. Just let the words carry you. Let's begin. It was one of those crisp autumn evenings when the fading light turned everything into a soft, golden hue, and the air carried the sweet scent of wood smoke. I found myself in my small, cozy kitchen, where the sound of a kettle softly whistling punctuated the stillness. The warm glow from the countertop lamp wrapped around me like an old, comforting sweater, and the window panes were fogged with the gentle breath of the evening. Outside, leaves danced lazily to the ground, their colors a riot of amber and crimson, and I could almost hear the whispers of the trees as they let go of another season. I had just returned from a long day at work, the kind where the hours seem to stretch and the decisions feel heavier than usual. The chaos of the day began to dissolve as I poured myself a cup of tea, watching the steam curl upward like a tiny, delicate wisp of cloud. The familiar routine was soothing, grounding me as I took my first sip, the warmth spreading through me like a gentle hug. I had chosen chamomile that evening, its calming aroma swirling around the room, mixing with the faint, sweet scent of the apple pie cooling on the counter just beside me. As I settled into my well-worn armchair, the fabric slightly frayed at the edges but still soft beneath my fingers, I reflected on the decision that had been lingering like a shadow over me for weeks. I had finally mustered the courage to let go of a job that no longer felt right, where the weight of expectation had begun to stifle my spirit. It hadn't been an easy choice, and as I waved goodbye to that part of my life, I could still feel the comforting tug of familiarity trying to keep me tethered. But something deep inside had whispered for me to move forward, to embrace the unknown. The tea warmed my hands as I cradled the cup, feeling the heat radiate through my palms, and I let my thoughts drift like the leaves outside. I thought about the conversations I had with my close friend Lucy just days before. We had sat on her porch, wrapped in blankets, the stars twinkling overhead like tiny lanterns. She listened intently as I shared my feelings, her presence a calming balm. "Sometimes you have to leap," she had said softly, her dark hair catching the silver light of the moon. "You can't always know where you'll land, but it's in the leap that you find yourself." Those words echoed in my mind now, resting comfortably among the other memories of that evening. The sound of laughter, the way we both paused to admire the fireflies flickering in the dusk, and the closeness that came from sharing dreams, fears, and everything in between. I smiled to myself, remembering how her laughter was like a gentle melody, coaxing me out of the shadows and into the light of possibility. With her, every moment felt safe, cherished, as if we had created a small sanctuary amid the busyness of life. I took another sip of tea, feeling the warmth settle in my chest. The decision to leave the job had felt like stepping onto a path shrouded in mist, the way ahead unclear. But here in the cozy embrace of my home, I realized I was no longer afraid. The fire crackled softly in the corner, the flickering light casting dancing shadows across the walls. I leaned back in the chair, allowing myself to sink deeper into the fabric, feeling the weariness of the day slowly drift away, along with all the worries that had weighed on my mind. In that moment, I noticed how the clock on the wall ticked gently, each soft chime a reminder of the present of now. Outside, the wind picked up ever so slightly, rustling the leaves and creating a gentle symphony that mingled with the soothing sounds from the fireplace. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing deeply, and I could almost taste the crispness in the air, mixed with the faint sweetness of the pie still cooling on the counter. It was a moment to simply be, to let the world around me fade away, and in that stillness, I could feel the tentacles of anxiety loosening their grip. As I sat there, enveloped in warmth and simple pleasures, I allowed myself to dream about what might come next. Perhaps a new job awaited me, One where my creativity could stretch its wings again, or maybe travel would beckon me, whispering promises of adventure in far-off lands. I thought of volunteering, of putting my skills to use in ways I hadn't yet imagined, and the warmth in my chest blossomed at the thought. Each possibility felt like a seed planted in rich soil, ready to take root and grow. Time seemed to slip through my fingers like the steam rising from my cup, and I allowed myself to drift deeper into the comfort of my surroundings. The shadows danced on the walls, and I could hear the soft crackle of the fire, a gentle rhythm that mirrored the steady beat of my heart. I sank further into the chair, aware of the slight creak of the wood as it embraced me, as if the space itself understood the weight of my choices, and was equally eager to welcome the newness of what lay ahead. I thought about reaching for my notebook, perhaps jotting down ideas, but the allure of the moment kept me still, cocooned in the warmth of my thoughts. Instead, I let my mind wander back to the evening I had shared with Lucy, the taste of chocolate chip cookies we had baked together, our laughter bubbling like the dough rising in the oven. The simplicity of that moment felt like home, a reminder that joy often found its way into the ordinary details of life. As the fire began to soften into glowing embers, I felt a gentle drowsiness pulling me beneath its warm blanket. My eyelids grew heavy, and without any urge to resist, I let myself drift into a quiet reverie, embracing the stillness of the room, the soft sounds that surrounded me. The ticking clock, the crackling fire, the distant rustle of leaves. In the sanctuary of my home, I allowed the weight of my decision to settle softly, like the gentle touch of a feather, releasing the tension I didn't even know I had been holding on to. There was a quiet contentment in the air, a realization that it was okay to step into the unknown, to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. In this moment, all felt right. The world outside would keep turning. The stars would continue to twinkle like little beacons of hope. And I, nestled in my chair with the fading light and the lingering aroma of tea, felt ready to welcome whatever tomorrow would bring. As my breath slowed and my thoughts softened, I surrendered to the peaceful lull of the evening, the warmth wrapping around me like a beloved quilt, a gentle reminder that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Here, in this cozy space, all that was left to do was let go and float softly into sleep, secure in the knowledge that each new dawn brought with it endless possibilities. And for now, there was nothing more to wish for than this quiet, beautiful moment. And now, our next story. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the kitchen as I stirred a pot of oatmeal on the stove. The scent of cinnamon danced in the air, curling around me like a favorite well-worn blanket. Outside, the world was waking up, the soft chirping of birds weaving gently into the silence, punctuated only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. I could hear the faint, rhythmic drip of the coffee maker, a comforting cadence that seemed to sync with my own heartbeat. As I pondered the simple pleasures of a quiet morning, I leaned against the countertop, the cool marble contrasting against the warmth of the sun that spilled through the window. A mug rested before me, its surface steaming, and I watched as tendrils of steam danced and curled into the air before fading away, like dreams in the morning light. It was on mornings like this that I felt most at peace, yet there was a familiar flutter of anticipation deep within me. Today I would see Clara. Clara and I had met almost 2 months ago at a small bookshop nestled between a quaint bakery and an old-fashioned florist. The place was a treasure trove of stories, its shelves filled with tomes that spoke softly of adventure and romance. As an introvert, I often found solace in such corners, where the noise of the world faded away into gentle whispers. I'd been thumbing through a collection of poetry when I first heard her laughter, a light and lilting sound that cut through my quiet musings. I turned to find her, seated on the floor with a stack of books beside her, a smile playing at the corners of her lips as she exchanged a playful glance with a nearby shelf. Our initial conversation had been a tentative exchange of thoughts about favorite authors and hidden literary gems. She spoke with a fervor that lit up her hazel eyes, and I found myself leaning in, captivated by her passion. There was a spark of connection that felt both reassuring and thrilling, a rare meeting of two souls who understood without words. The beauty of silence. As we parted that day, I felt a gentle tug of something more, a whisper of possibility that lingered in the air. In the weeks that followed, we spent afternoons together in the park, watching autumn leaves drift lazily to the ground, their colors a vibrant palette of gold and rust. We wandered through art galleries, sharing unspoken admiration for the strokes of paint that seemed to breathe life into the canvas. Conversations flowed easily, but there were still moments of quiet, where we simply sat side by side, enjoying the stillness that wrapped around us like a soft shawl. I treasured those pauses, feeling a comfortable warmth in her presence, a refuge for two hearts that had always been a bit shy. The morning of our planned outing had arrived, and I stood in my kitchen, sipping the last of my coffee, an eager flutter becoming a dance in my chest. I had chosen my clothes carefully, a light sweater that felt as soft as the clouds, and jeans that were a familiar embrace. I glanced at the clock on the wall, the second hand ticking away like a gentle reminder of how slow time could be when waiting for something wonderful. As I gathered a small canvas bag, my fingers brushed over the sketchbook tucked inside. I had taken to doodling small moments that embodied our time together. Clara laughing at a joke I'd shared, her serious concentration as she examined a painting, the way her hair caught the light when she stood beneath the trees. Each sketch was a quiet testament to my growing affection for her, and I hoped today would offer another page of memories to capture. The brisk air outside felt invigorating as I made my way to the park we often visited. I could see the trees swaying gently, their branches creating a soft rustling symphony, the sounds wrapping around my ears like a cherished melody. There was an excitement crackling in the air, a shared anticipation that filled me as I approached our usual meeting spot, beneath a grand oak tree, its branches reaching for the sky, a guardian of our moments. When Clara arrived, there was an instant brightness in her smile, and as she approached, I couldn't help but mirror her enthusiasm. "Hey," she greeted, her voice laced with warmth. "I brought some sketching supplies. Thought we could draw the scenery?" "None." "Perfect," I replied, imagining the world we could create together on paper. We settled on a blanket we often shared, its fabric soft and inviting beneath us, and soon the world around us faded into a gentle hum. There was laughter as we poked fun at our less-than-stellar attempts at capturing the beauty of the park. Yet, nestled in our little bubble, it didn't seem to matter. As the afternoon wore on, the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting everything in shades of soft orange and pale pink. We engaged in quiet conversation, sharing bits of our lives, the kind of stories that took their time to unfold, just like the petals of a flower. Clara spoke about her childhood, how her love for books had begun with the bedtime stories her mother would tell. Tales filled with magic and adventure that made her believe in the impossible. I shared my own tales of my clumsy attempts at creativity, my childhood daydreams that had often drifted away like the clouds overhead. And then, in a moment that felt both fragile and profound, Clara turned to me, her gaze unwavering. "You know, it's nice to find someone who gets it," she said softly, as if she were sharing a secret meant only for us. The way her eyes sparkled at that moment made me feel seen, appreciated in a way I hadn't quite realized I craved. "Yeah," I replied, a smile spreading across my face. "It really is." As dusk painted the sky in indigo and violet, we gathered our things, and the world felt just a little bit more magical. While we walked side by side, the quiet hum of the evening enveloped us, and I noticed the way our footsteps fell into an easy rhythm, comfortable and unhurried. There was a moment right there between us where I dared to reach for her hand, my heart racing ever so slightly. It was a timid gesture, a small bridge across the gentle distance that still lingered, but when her fingers curled around mine, it felt like coming home. We exchanged a glance, and in that shared silence, I felt a new layer of our bond begin to weave itself quietly into existence. Later, as I settled back into the warmth of my home, I found myself reflecting on the day. A simple outing with a touch of gentle magic that lingered like the sweet scent of cinnamon. I pulled out my sketchbook to contribute another memory to our unfolding story. The moon hung high, spilling silvery light across the pages as I let the tranquility of my evening guide my pencil. The lines blurred and flowed, capturing not just moments held in time, but the essence of the connection we were cultivating. Two introverts discovering a world together, one gentle laugh and quiet conversation at a time. I could already envision tomorrow, the promise of the next adventure anew, and I felt a soft sense of contentment. With each stroke of my pencil, I was reminded that love, in its own gentle way, doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, like the soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, the warm shimmer of sunlight, or the comfortable silence shared between two souls who simply understand. I took a deep breath, letting it fill me completely, and felt the weight of the day settle into a peaceful stillness. As I closed my sketchbook, I could hear the soft ticking of the clock in the background, a lullaby of moments slipping away, and I let the tranquility wrap around me, embracing each feeling of gratitude for what had unfolded. Outside, the world began to quiet down, the sounds of the day gently retreating, leading me into a soft slumber of dreams yet to come. Take a deep breath, and let's move on to the next one. The gentle hum of the kettle filled the kitchen, mingling with the comforting scent of fresh-baked muffins cooling on the counter. Outside the window, droplets of rain slid down the glass, leaving behind little trails as they raced each other to the sill. I could see how the gray clouds hung low in the sky, casting a soft glow on everything beneath them. The world felt cozy, wrapped in layers of mist and muted colors, like being nestled under a warm quilt with a good book. As I stood at the counter, I ran my fingers over the rough texture of the wooden surface, and I could hear the soft pitter-patter of raindrops tapping against the roof. It was a perfect afternoon to settle into a quiet, contemplative space, the kind that made you want to linger. I poured the steaming water into a brightly colored teapot, watching as the tea leaves danced and twirled, releasing their rich aroma. Each breath filled me with warmth and a sense of peace, a cocoon that wrapped around me. I remembered a time, not so long ago, when I found myself caught up in the small, everyday squabbles that sometimes nudge their way into life, much like the rain that had decided to grace us that day. It had started on a Tuesday afternoon, much like this one. I had returned home from work, the evening air fragrant with the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. As I hung my coat, I couldn't help but notice that the yard, once vibrant with wildflowers, looked somewhat bare. My neighbor, Mr. Caldwell, had been busy with his newfound love for gardening. He had barely kept his hands off my precious flowers, which had, unfortunately for me, been planted right along the fence that separated our two properties. Now, Mr. Caldwell was not a bad neighbor, but he had a tendency to take liberties when it came to my flower beds. He had pulled some of my daisies to make room for his prize-winning marigolds, which I had to admit were rather beautiful, but not without their own touch of destruction. That day, as I surveyed the evidence of my floral misfortune, a light bulb flickered in my mind. My grandmother used to say, "Every flower deserves its moment in the sun, but a little mischief can keep life interesting." I chuckled softly to myself, stirring the tea with a gentle clink of the spoon against the side of the pot. I pondered on just how I might reclaim my corner of the yard, and the idea came to me like a whisper from the universe. I would sneak across the fence when the sun dipped low and light the way with my lantern, a little flickering flame of revenge that would be harmless but satisfying, like a sweet note in an otherwise boring song. The rain continued tapping against the kitchen window as I reminisced about the evening I had chosen to put my plan into action. The sun dipped beneath the horizon, painting everything in hues of orange and purple, and the air was rich with the intoxicating scent of wet grass. I gathered my tools, a small trowel, some seeds, and my trusty watering can, and crept outside, heart racing with the thrill of mischief. With every step in the soft mud, I felt the excitement build within me. It was just a few minutes until I reached the spot beside the fence where my daisies had once thrived. With care and attention, I began to plant a row of bright, cheerful wildflowers, the kind that would spread and weave their way through the soil. I imagined how Mr. Caldwell would stumble upon them, a small surprise for his overzealous gardening. As I carefully covered each seed with earth, the soft sounds of the evening surrounded me. The chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves stirred by a passing breeze. I couldn't help but feel a thrill of joy and a hint of giggles bubbling up inside me. It was a light-hearted act, a gentle way of claiming a small piece of my garden back, and it made me smile. The next morning, the rain had stopped, and the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light over the garden. I made my way to the window, peering out at the little patch beside the fence. There they were, my wildflowers, brave and bold, swaying gently in the morning breeze. I felt a rush of satisfaction, as if the garden itself was grinning back at me. Later that day, I encountered Mr. Caldwell, trimming his marigolds. I stepped outside, and we exchanged pleasantries, the soft chatter of neighbors floating between us. As he spoke about his latest gardening triumphs, I couldn't help but steal glances at my wildflowers. They stood proudly, a kaleidoscope of colors that could barely be contained, and I could see the flicker of surprise in Mr. Caldwell's eyes as he noticed them. "What a lovely mix you've got there," he remarked, his voice tinged with genuine curiosity, and I felt a warmth spread through me. "Thank you. I thought I'd try something new," I replied, barely able to suppress a smile. And then, as if the universe was sharing a secret, he said, "You know, I have some extra seeds if you'd like to swap. I've been meaning to bring some flowers over that can climb the fence. They're quite easy to manage." No. I nodded with a hint of laughter dancing in my chest. Ah, the sweet irony of it all. Here I was, seeking a touch of petty revenge, and instead, it felt like the gardening gods had conspired to create a new connection. As the afternoon sun began to wane, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The laughter shared with Mr. Caldwell seemed to float softly in the air like dandelion seeds on the wind. I realized that gardening had brought us closer rather than pushing us apart. And perhaps a little mischief born out of frustration can sometimes lead to the most delightful friendships. Time slipped by gently, like the echoes of a soft melody, and soon those wild flowers grew, their colors vibrant and welcoming. Mr. Caldwell and I traded seeds regularly thereafter, our gardens contentedly entwined into one another, much like our evenings spent chatting over the fences, sharing tea and laughter that danced in the twilight. With each passing season, my heart became unburdened by any annoyance I had felt originally. Instead, I came to cherish the beauty of that shared space. The rain against the window now felt soothing as I reflected on the kindness that grew between us like the flowers in our yards. As I poured the last of my tea, the cozy warmth enveloped me once again. I sat back in my chair, looking around at the softness of my kitchen, the fading light dimming outside. The world felt still and serene, and I felt grateful for the twists and turns that life often presents. With the lingering scent of freshly baked muffins and the gentle patter of rain outside, I allowed my eyes to close softly, lulled by the comforting memories of kindness and connection. The last flicker of daylight faded, and in the quiet I found peace, slipping into the calm embrace of a delightful slumber. Close your eyes and settle in for this one. The sun hung low in the sky as I sat on the porch of my little house in Maplewood, the air warm with the faint scent of blooming honeysuckle. I could hear the gentle rustle of the leaves in the oak tree nearby, swaying lazily in the soft evening breeze. It was one of those perfect late afternoons, where everything felt just right, like the world had settled into a comfortable rhythm, and time seemed to stretch lazily like the cat who had nestled in my lap. The wooden boards creaked softly beneath me as I adjusted my position, allowing the sunlight to filter between the leaves and cast playful shadows on the floor. I could hear the distant laughter of children playing tag in the yard across the street, their joyful shouts mingling with the sound of cicadas beginning their symphony as dusk approached. A few fireflies flickered in the garden, their tiny lights twinkling like stars that had somehow found their way down to earth. As I sunk deeper into the tranquil atmosphere of the evening, my thoughts drifted to the small town's local diner, a beloved institution known as Millie's Cafe. It was a cozy spot, with worn leather booths and a jukebox that had seen better days, yet it remained the heart of Maplewood. Millie, with her warm smile and bright red lipstick, knew everyone's name and order by heart. I could almost taste her famous cherry pie, the sweet tart filling coated in a flaky crust, and the dollop of fresh whipped cream that melted slowly on the side of the plate. Life in Maplewood was simple, yet every now and then, something would stir the pot, a little ripple in our placid pond. There was a time when a new family moved into town, the Thompsons. They were friendly enough at first glance, but there was something about Mr. Thompson. He had a way of bending the rules, a slight edge to his smile that left a whisper of unease in the air. I shrugged it off at first, thinking perhaps it was just my overactive imagination, or my tendency to read too many mysteries, but as weeks turned into months, his behavior began to echo like a distant chime. The whispers started in Millie's, as they always did. I remember sitting in my usual booth, just a little past noon, as the town's familiar chatter washed over me like a gentle tide. "Have you heard about Mr. Thompson?" Linda, the librarian, asked, her voice low and conspiratorial. "He's been undercutting everyone's prices at the hardware store. Discounts that make no sense." Another patron, Bob, chimed in. "Aye, makes the rest of us look bad. I swear, he's got a knack for finding loopholes. Disgraceful if you ask me." "Manas." I sipped my coffee, warm, slightly bitter, just the way I liked it, trying to process. It was true. I had noticed Mr. Thompson's store becoming more favored for supplies, his deals drawing the customers away from old Mr. Jenkins' shop, the very cornerstone of the community. It gnawed at me like a stubborn toothache every time Mr. Jenkins would shuffle into the diner, shoulders hunched, glancing at the empty tables around him just a little too often. Days stretched to weeks, and one afternoon as I stood in line for my slice of pie, I overheard another conversation, this time between Millie and Clara, who worked the counter. "It's not just the prices," Millie said, wiping her hands on her apron with a frown that told me she felt the weight of it all. "He's got that nasty habit of saying, well, unkind things about the other businesses. It's like he thinks he's better than us." No. I felt a flash of indignation. Maplewood was a little town, a place where kindness was the currency, and everyone supported one another. Mr. Thompson's actions felt like he was prying apart the delicate threads that held us together. That evening, I resolved to visit Mr. Jenkins to see how he was faring. The sun had dipped below the horizon when I finally made my way to Jerry's Hardware. I was greeted by the familiar creak of the door and the warm smell of wood shavings and paint. To my surprise, I found Mr. Jenkins surrounded by a small gathering of his loyal customers, each one with a troubled expression. Told him regular prices weren't enough. He'd rather go out of business. Mr. Jenkins sighed, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for a piece of paper that had seen better days. "But I'm afraid I can't match what he's doing." The whispers of support around him were heartfelt, but it was clear that they felt helpless. As I listened, a little spark ignited inside me. I had seen the camaraderie of this town flourish over the years, and I couldn't just stand by. After some quiet reflection, I proposed the smallest idea, a little community meeting where we could all gather and share our experiences. Maybe even find a way to support Mr. Jenkins together. It turned out to be a surprisingly warm gathering under the old oak tree behind the school. The air was fragrant with the smell of grass and the last remnants of summer. As neighbors brought pie and lemonade, we shared stories, laughter, and a few sighs of frustration. Each voice added to the collective strength, and together we brainstormed ideas on how to rally behind our beloved hardware store. With every passing moment, I could feel a sense of unity growing among us. We decided to run a little campaign, emphasizing what made Maplewood special: the good old-fashioned values, the sense of community. Maybe a special event where we celebrated local businesses could shift the tide back toward kindness. And so the Maplewood Marketplace Day was born, a day filled with games for the kids, booths showcasing local crafts, and yes, even a pie-eating contest that Millie herself was more than happy to judge. As the day approached, I watched as my neighbors came together, painting signs, setting up stalls, and sharing ideas on how best to promote the day. Finally, the day arrived. The sun was bright, illuminating the joy that hung in the air like golden rays. Laughter erupted from every direction as children ran around, weaving between vendors. The smell of Millie's pies wafted through the air, drawing people with promises of sweet delights. To my delight, Mr. Jenkins had a booth right next to Millie's, his face flushed with pride as he handed out samples and provided a showcase of tools. In a beautiful twist of fate, as I stood behind the pie booth, I noticed Mr. Thompson wandering through our little fair, a frown pulling at his lips. It seemed he hadn't expected the warmth of our community to blossom like this. He watched, a little bewildered, as customers poured into the event, their laughter ringing sweetly against the backdrop of our small town. Gradually, the evening wound down, the sun setting in a glorious display of orange and pink hues. I caught Mr. Jenkins' eye, and he smiled broadly, a warmth blossoming in his gaze that told me we had all made a difference. As the last few patrons sauntered home, I noticed Mr. Thompson standing at the edge of the fair, shoulders sagging as he looked on. With a sudden rush of compassion, I approached him. "You know, Mr. Thompson," I said softly, "we're really proud of our little town. Maybe sometime you could join us at Millie's Cafe and share ideas on how to make Maplewood even better?" Nah. He looked at me, surprise flickering in his eyes, and for the first time I saw a hint of something. Perhaps it was understanding. "Maybe you're right," he replied quietly, almost reluctantly. "I suppose I could give it a shot." As I walked back into the fold of my neighbors, I felt the soft hum of connection weaving through us, the air thick with possibilities for kindness and community. In that moment, I realized that sometimes it simply took a little spark to foster change, and all of us, with our small acts of love and support, could create something beautiful together. That night, as I settled back on my porch, the fireflies danced like little stars in the darkening sky, and the sounds of laughter faded into the gentle hum of night. The world felt manageable, and I breathed in deeply, grateful for the warmth of my community. I pulled a blanket around my shoulders, the fabric soft against my skin, and let my eyelids grow heavy. The memories of that day began to soften at the edges, like the light slowly fading into twilight, and I drifted off to the peaceful sound of crickets serenading the night. Let yourself relax as we begin the next story. I remember one quiet afternoon, wrapped in the gentle embrace of late autumn. I found myself in a small, familiar kitchen, sunlight streaming through the window like warm honey, casting lazy patterns on the worn linoleum floor. The air was rich with the earthy aroma of pumpkin spice, not too sweet, just enough to make you feel cozy inside. There was a faint sound of wind rustling the leaves outside, a comforting whisper that seemed to carry the laughter of children playing in the distance. I could almost hear the clinks of their bicycles against each other and feel the warmth of a woolen blanket draped over the back of a chair, waiting to be nestled into. Sitting at the kitchen table, I savored a fresh slice of pumpkin bread, still slightly warm from the oven. It melted ever so gently on my tongue, rich and spicy, with the texture of home. I took a sip of cinnamon tea, the steam curling up around my face, filling my senses with its spicy, soft warmth. It was the kind of afternoon that made worries feel light and distant, a moment perfectly suspended in time. As I enjoyed this calming scene, my younger self fluttered into my mind like a leaf dancing on a breeze. Ah, the things I would tell that eager child, bustling about with dreams too big for her little hands. She was a force of whimsy and curiosity, always wearing an oversized sweater with a smudge of something bright across the sleeve. I could hear her laughter, that high ringing sound that often accompanied her antics. And it was during one of her adventures, back when misunderstandings were simply another step in a winding path, that a rather amusing tale began to unfold. It happened on a crisp afternoon, much like the one I found myself in now. She'd been tasked with picking up a few groceries for dinner. Her mother had given her a list, scrawled in a hurry, the ink slightly smudged at the edges. Among the items were sweet potatoes, a few apples, and a mysterious note that read, coconut milk. Such a simple list seemed harmless enough, yet it led to a delightful chaos that I couldn't help but chuckle at. She entered the little corner store, the familiar jingle of the door announcing her arrival. The air inside was cool, a welcome escape from the Christmas outside. Shelves were lined with all sorts of goodies, colorful jars and packages beckoning her like old friends. She remembered where the sweet potatoes sat, nestled comfortably near the back of the store, and made her way there, her excitement bubbling as she picked the perfect ones. Firm and bright orange. As she meandered through the aisles, the apples captured her attention. There were red ones, green ones, and even some that were speckled with gold. She laughed softly to herself as she picked them out, their cool, smooth surfaces fitting snugly in her small hands. But then, just as she was about to reach the dairy section for the coconut milk, a thought struck her. What did coconut milk even look like? Had she seen it before? This was not a common ingredient in their household. She shrugged it off, determined to find it anyway. Little did she know, this quest would lead her to an unexpected encounter with Mr. Thompson, the unassuming store owner. He was busy restocking the shelves, his glasses perched on the edge of his nose, looking quite serious. As she approached, she summoned her courage and asked him, "Excuse me, sir. Where might I find the coconut milk?" "Now in your Mr. B." Thompson paused, peering at her over the rims of his glasses as if he were trying to decipher a riddle. With a thoughtful nod, he said, "Ah, yes, you mean the coconut milk. Well, it's not up on the shelf today. I seem to have run out, but would you like to try our coconut ice cream instead? It's quite delightful." Nine said one. Her eyes widened in excitement at the very notion of coconut ice cream. Oh, yes. That sounds amazing. But wait. What's the difference between milk and ice cream? No, none. With a chuckle, he explained. Well, you see, coconut milk is liquid, whereas ice cream is frozen and solid. Both are coconut flavored, but different experiences. Now, different experiences, she repeated, nodding as if she were putting together a puzzle. She pictured herself sitting down for dinner, ice cream at the ready, and imagined her mother's face when she revealed her unexpected find. Without a moment's hesitation, she replied, "I'll take the coconut ice cream." And so, in that small, whimsical moment, her young heart made a connection that twisted and turned into laughter. With her treasures in hand, sweet potatoes, apples, and the pot of coconut ice cream, she returned home, her feet barely grazing the pavement as she hurried to share her delightful discoveries. I can still see her bouncing through that door like a little firecracker, her arms full of goodies. But then came the moment of truth. As she laid out her treasures on the kitchen table, her mother eyed the ice cream skeptically. "Ice cream? For dinner?" she asked, one eyebrow raised. "Oh, it's coconut milk, just like you asked," my younger self declared, beaming with pride as she pointed to the carton. Her mother laughed, a sound that danced like sunlight across the room. Coconut milk sweetie goes in a recipe, not for dessert. But Mr. Ra Thompson said it was delightful. She insisted, her voice holding a note of innocence that tugged at the heartstrings. In that moment, we laughed together, both at the misunderstanding and the delightful twist it had taken. What had started as a simple grocery run had unfolded into a memory woven with laughter, warmth, and the pleasure of a happy surprise. As the evening progressed, they settled in with the unorthodox meal of sweet potatoes, apples, and coconut ice cream. From the kitchen, the soft sounds of laughter, shared stories, and warmth wrapped around them like a gentle hug, each bite of ice cream evocative of the joy that comes when life doesn't go as planned but turns out even better. And now, as I sit in my kitchen, that memory rises like a delicate mist, a reminder of how the smallest moments can fill our hearts with joy. I can't help but smile at the thought of telling my younger self, it's okay to embrace the unexpected. Life is a mixture of flavors, and sometimes it's the surprises that taste the sweetest. A calm settles over me as I take one last sip of my tea, the steam rising gently before I set my cup down. The light from the window blinks softly, a quiet reminder that this moment, too, is to be cherished. And so, as I pull the blanket up to my chin, the warmth wrapping around me like a familiar old friend, I take a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet scent of pumpkin spice drifting through the air. It's a beautiful evening, and I know that all is well. Slipping into stillness, I allow the gentle hum of the world outside to lull me, cradling me in its soothing embrace. With a quiet sigh, I switch off the lamp beside me, leaving only the soft glow of evening beyond the window. I close my eyes and surrender to that peaceful calm. I am home. Take a deep breath, and let's move on to the next one. I remember the early mornings in that little kitchen, the kind of mornings where time felt soft and forgiving, as if all the world outside held its breath for a moment before rushing into the day. The cheery blue curtains fluttered gently with the breeze, the sun casting a warm, golden light across the worn wooden table. I could often smell the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the faint sweetness of brown sugar, a fragrance that wrapped itself around me like a cozy shawl. I would sit at the table, wrapped in a soft plaid blanket, watching the steam curl up from my mug. Outside, the world was slowly coming to life, the sounds of distant cars humming softly in the background, mixed with the occasional laughter from children playing down the street. I could hear a dog barking, perhaps urging its owner to hurry up, or maybe just letting the world know that it was ready for their morning walks. As the sunlight streamed through the window, it illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air, and I would find that I didn't mind moving slowly on those mornings, as if this small moment, this little kitchen, was enough to fill me with a warmth. 9. One particular morning, as I settled into that routine, my thoughts drifted to the day ahead. A quick trip to the grocery store was on my mind, a simple errand, but somehow it felt daunting. I chuckled to myself, realizing how a task so mundane could feel overwhelming. I could already picture the long line at the checkout, the rustle of bags, the weight of decisions on what to buy. I could almost hear the faint beeping of the register and the polite, if slightly impatient, conversations of fellow shoppers. With a sigh, I decided to wrap myself in another layer of comfort and put one foot in front of the other. I placed my mug on the table and stepped into my shoes, a pair of scuffed sneakers that I had grown accustomed to, and headed out the door. As I walked, I adjusted to the cool air brushing against my cheeks, invigorating and gentle. The trees lining the street were just beginning to change colors, the leaves shifting from deep greens to soft browns and fiery reds, like nature was preparing a beautiful farewell before the chill of winter set in. I ambled past the neighborhood cafe where I could hear snippets of laughter and the clinking of cups, a warm invitation that fluttered through the air. Yet I pressed on, stepping into the grocery store and trying to shake off the weight of my earlier worries. I grabbed a cart and meandered through the aisles, letting the vibrant colors of the fruits and vegetables wash over me. The ripe oranges and bright red apples beckoned, and a soft smile crossed my face as I filled my cart with the usual essentials. As I moved on to the cereal aisle, I found myself lost in thought, contemplating whether I should indulge in the chocolate-covered kind or just stick with the wholesome oats. In that moment of indecision, my attention was drawn away by the sound of footsteps growing near. I turned my head slightly, and there an elderly woman approached, balancing a basket on her arm. Her silver hair glistened under the fluorescent lights, and she wore a soft cardigan that made her look even more inviting. "Excuse me, dear," she said, her voice warm and tender like honey on a chilly day. "Could you help me reach that box on the top shelf? I seem to have misplaced my superhero powers today." She chuckled softly, her laughter a gentle melody that soothed the small worries swirling in my mind. I smiled back at her, a warm connection sparking between us as I reached up to grab the box of tea she was eyeing. "Here you go," I said, handing it to her. Choice. I hear it's quite the cozy brew." "Oh, thank you, darling. I've been looking forward to a nice cup of tea while I read my favorite book this evening," she replied, her eyes twinkling like the stars just before dawn. It was such a simple exchange, a moment where worries faded into the background, replaced by the soft warmth of human connection. As our conversation continued, she shared stories about her garden, about how she painted the rocks she found on the beach and placed them lovingly among her flowers. The way she spoke with a brightness in her voice made it feel less like a casual conversation and more like a delightful marvel, like stumbling upon a hidden treasure. Time slipped by unnoticed as she told tales of a particular rock she'd found, shaped just like a heart, and how it inspired her to plant red tulips nearby. I listened intently, feeling the weight of my earlier worries begin to dissolve. The gentle cadence of her words washed over me, comforting and familiar. It felt as if I had stepped away from the rush of life, just for a moment, and into a little pocket of stillness. We laughed softly together, sharing impressions of our lives as shoppers around us moved in and out of our quiet bubble, their hurried footsteps drifting into a blend of white noise, almost dreamlike. Eventually, the cart filled with groceries was a gentle reminder that the mundanity of life awaited, and I knew it was time to move on. Yet, as we exchanged goodbyes, the elderly woman placed her hand gently on my arm, and I felt a warmth seep into my skin. "You have the kindest heart, dear. Remember that kindness creates ripples, and every little action matters. I hope your day is filled with as much joy as you've brought me today." None. Her words hung in the air, imbued with an unexpected weight. I carried them with me as I approached the self-checkout, the soft beeping and scanning of items grounding me back into reality. Even as I completed my transaction, her gentle voice echoed in my mind, a small reminder that the world could feel larger than it often seemed, tugging at the corners of my heart. As I stepped outside into the crisp, golden light, I paused for a moment, the warmth of the sun enveloping me like a familiar embrace. I could hear children laughing again, their giggles mingling with the rustle of leaves as they kicked their way through a carpet of fallen gold. The sky was painted a pale blue, dotted with cotton candy clouds, and everything felt, if only for an instant, impossibly beautiful. I strolled home, my bag swaying softly at my side, each step imbued with lightness. The mundane errands fell away, and I felt a deep sense of connection, both to the woman who had effortlessly brightened my day and to the world around me. As I turned the key in my door, stepping back into the small sanctuary of my home, I couldn't help but feel a swell of gratitude filling my chest. That evening, I brewed myself a cup of tea, the same kind the woman had spoken of in the aisle. I settled onto the couch, the familiar blanket wrapping around me, and sipped, letting the warmth wash over me as I gazed out the window. The twilight deepened, each moment stretching into the next, as the soft glow of the street lamp flickered outside, casting gentle shapes and shadows across my living room. As I closed my eyes, I thought of the elderly woman with her tales of painted rocks and bright tulips, her words lingering like an echo of kindness. I felt a soothing sense of peace surrounding me, a calm reassurance that the world was indeed full of kindness, even in the smallest of gestures. And with that thought drifting through my mind, I sank deeper into the warmth of the room, drifting slowly, ever so gently, into the embrace of the night. Let yourself relax as we begin the next story. It was a chilly Tuesday morning, and I remember waking up to the familiar scent of a warm cinnamon roll baking in the oven. The air was filled with a comforting warmth that seemed to wrap around me like a soft blanket. I could hear the gentle hum of the coffee maker bubbling away in the kitchen, its rhythmic sound combining effortlessly with the distant chirping of birds outside my window. The clouds were painted in soft hues of gray, promising a hint of rain by the afternoon, which perfectly matched the cozy atmosphere inside. I slipped out of bed, the wooden floor cool beneath my feet, and padded into the kitchen where my roommate Lily was already dressed in her favorite oversized sweater that seemed to swallow her whole. She had a penchant for choosing clothing that felt like a warm hug. As she glanced up from the oven, her face lit up with that bright smile of hers. "Morning. I thought we could have a little treat to start the day," she said, pulling the rolls from the oven and placing them on a cooling rack with a gentle clatter. The sweet aroma wafted through the air, mingling perfectly with the rich scent of freshly brewed coffee. "I can already taste them," I replied, leaning against the counter, savoring the moment. We shared a quiet rhythm in the mornings, often enjoying our breakfast without feeling the need to fill the silence with chatter. Today, however, a slight tension had begun to float in the air, though I couldn't pinpoint why. I worked in a small office with a team of 5. We were a close-knit group, and as a result, often shared the little dramas of our day-to-day lives. While there was no explicit conflict, I had started to sense an undercurrent of unease in our meetings lately. It felt like a couple of stray threads were fraying, just waiting for someone to tug on them to unravel the whole fabric of our work relationship. Yet I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Probably just me overthinking again, I thought. After breakfast, I stepped into my favorite navy blue raincoat, the one lined with the softest flannel that felt like wearing a hug. The patter of raindrops began as I walked to my car, the thin mist wrapping around my ankles. The drive to work was uneventful. Raindrops danced upon the windshield, creating small rivers that twisted and turned, carrying the world away. Arriving at the office, I found my colleagues sitting around the communal table, their laughter and quiet discussions blending into a comfortable background buzz. I settled into my usual spot, and as the morning wore on, I realized our team dynamics were shifting. Miranda, who typically brightened our meetings with her easy laughter, seemed pensive, her brow furrowed as she glanced at her notes. Jacob, who was normally the life of the party, wore an unusual expression of distraction. Occasionally I caught him observing the room, seemingly lost in thought. During our mid-morning break, I stepped out into the hallway with a steaming cup of herbal tea. The warm liquid felt good in my hands, grounding me as I stared out the window at the rain-soaked world. Clouds hung low, casting a serene shadow over everything. I breathed deeply, allowing the calm to seep in, and then headed back towards our meeting room, feeling a twinge of concern. As we gathered again, Lily's cheerful voice cutting through my thoughts, I sensed I might be able to help ease some of the tension. I made a soft and thoughtful attempt to steer the conversation towards a more lighthearted topic, asking about everyone's weekend plans. "Anyone up for a little adventure?" I quipped, playfully nudging Jacob's shoulder. That drew a chuckle from him, which felt like a small victory. "Only if it doesn't involve hiking," he countered with a mock gasp, folding his arms dramatically. Lily laughed, and soon the air lightened, casting away some of the heaviness that had permeated our earlier discussions. Yet as we continued, I realized it wasn't enough. There was still something beneath the surface, a quiet dissonance waiting to be addressed. The meeting dripped on, with discussions morphing from pleasant laughter to moments of silence that lingered just a bit too long. I could see Miranda's fingers drumming against the table, each tap echoing a small reminder of the unresolved tension. After the meeting, I hesitated before approaching her at her desk. "Hey," I said softly, leaning against the doorway. "I couldn't help but notice you seemed a bit distant today." "Everything Okay? Now we know. She looked up, her eyes wide with surprise, as if I'd caught her off guard. Oh, I... It's nothing really. Just a lot on my mind, she admitted, brushing her hair back from her face. I could sense the weight she carried in her sigh. I've been stressed about that upcoming presentation. I nodded, understanding. Presentations could be daunting, especially when you weren't sure how your work would be received. I'm happy to help if you want, I offered. Her expression softened, and she smiled shyly. Really? I guess that would be nice. None. We settled into a gentle rhythm as I helped her brainstorm ideas, our voices intermingling like the rain outside. It was amusing to see her passion emerge, the way her eyes sparkled as she began to articulate her thoughts. The stress seemed to ebb away bit by bit, replaced by bursts of laughter when I made playful suggestions. As the hours drifted by, the rain continued to tap against the windows, creating a soothing backdrop. Gradually, the office filled with an electric energy that felt lighter, as if we were all participating in a shared secret of camaraderie. Jacob even chimed in, sparking a friendly debate over fonts and layouts, which drew giggles from Miranda and me. The room felt warm and inviting, shared laughter enveloping us like a snug blanket. By the time the clock creaked towards 5, all the tension had ebbed away, leaving behind a comfortable familiarity. We wrapped up our day with a lingering discussion, our collective anxiety replaced by feelings of kinship. Walking home, I found myself smiling. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, and each raindrop shimmered like tiny jewels under the streetlights. I could hear the soft patter of my footsteps as I made my way through our small neighborhood, the air rich and sweet after the rain. Lily was waiting for me when I entered our little haven, the cinnamon roll aroma still faintly floating through the air, battling the scent of wet earth. "How was your day?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "It was surprisingly lovely," I said, sinking onto the couch beside her, surrendering to the warmth of the moment. I smiled as I shared the details, watching her chuckle at the thought of Jacob pretending to faint over a poorly chosen font. As darkness settled outside, we continued to sit in that cozy space, the world outside fading away. The laughter and the shared stories wrapped around us like the warmth of a soft blanket, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. At the end of the day, as the lamp in the corner cast a gentle glow around us, I knew that every small moment, every thread of connection, was what made our little world special. It was a quiet affirmation that things were okay, that we were all just navigating life together, one laugh at a time. With a soft sigh, I closed my eyes for just a moment, letting the stillness envelop me before slipping into the content warmth of sleep, knowing tomorrow would bring more laughter, more camaraderie, and perhaps even an adventure. Let yourself relax as we begin the next story. It was one of those late spring afternoons that held the promise of summer, but still lingered in the soft embrace of spring. The air was warm, but a gentle breeze flitted through the open window, playing with the drapes like a curious child. I could smell the remnants of lunch, a hint of garlic and fresh basil mingling with the sweetness of the peonies blooming just outside. Their delicate fragrance floated in, wrapping around me, creating an almost magical cocoon in our little kitchen. The sunlight poured through the window in golden beams, illuminating the patterned tablecloth that was a few shades faded from too many sun-drenched breakfasts. I leaned back in my chair, taking a moment to soak in the quiet peace of the afternoon. The rhythmic tapping of a woodpecker echoed faintly in the distance, a comforting reminder of life bustling just outside my tranquil perch. It felt good to draw in deep breaths, savoring the simplicity of the moment as I watched the dust motes dance lazily in the light. But underneath it all, a gentle flutter of uncertainty had settled in my stomach. I had spent the past few weeks sorting through old boxes, a task I had put off for far too long, and today I had stumbled upon a faded scrapbook. It was a time capsule of sorts, filled with photographs and mementos that beckoned me to reminisce, to explore the tangled threads of my path. It lay on the table like an unopened letter, a vessel for memories I hadn't dared to revisit for years. So as I sat there, the afternoon light wrapping me in a warm embrace, I felt an urge to reach for it, to peel back the layers of time and take a gentle stroll down memory lane. I could almost hear the faint jingle of laughter, the rustling of leaves, as if the very photographs were urging me to open the album, to let the memories spill forth like a cherished secret. With a soft sigh, I leaned forward and opened the scrapbook. The pages yellowed, but the words still clear and inviting. The first image that greeted me was of a sun-kissed day at the beach, the sand shimmering like gold beneath a cerulean sky. My friends and I were young, so full of unbridled joy, our smiles wide and bright as we leaped through waves that crashed with resounding laughter. I could almost hear the echo of our carefree giggles, the way the sun made us feel invincible, as if nothing could touch the happiness we shared. I traced the outline of the photograph with my fingertip, the faded memory pulling me deeper into that moment. I could almost taste the salt on my lips, feel the gentle tug of the ocean beneath my toes. But as I turned the page, the warmth of the sunlight shifted in the room, cast into gentle shadow by clouds drifting across the sky. The next page was a different story, holding faces that had changed over time. Friendships that ebbed and flowed like tides rolling in and out, currents pulling us apart. There was a photo of our tiny kitchen after a dinner party. Everyone gathered around the table, eyes sparkling with delight and a touch of mischief. We had all promised to stay connected, to create timeless memories. Yet here I was, looking back as some of those faces had grown distant, scattered like fallen leaves, each finding their own path. My heart clenched just a little, a bittersweet reminder of those who had stepped away, but I couldn't help but smile. Each person had added a unique color to the tapestry of my life, and I found solace in that thought. As I continued to flip through the pages, I encountered small items lovingly tucked in, love notes from old friends, pressed flowers, and even a handwritten recipe for our favorite pasta dish. They spoke of laughter shared over pots simmering on the stove, of spontaneous adventures that started with simple ideas and ended with unforgettable stories. I could hear the echo of voices in my mind, the genuine warmth of friendship woven through time, even if life had nudged some of us in different directions. I paused, letting my finger rest on a neatly folded letter. A note from Marianne, my closest friend from those days, who had moved away but never failed to reach out. Always checking in with a sweet hello. It was enough to keep my heartstrings intact, though I couldn't help but feel the familiar ache of nostalgia nestled in the corners of my heart. It dawned on me that letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It simply means acknowledging the ebb and flow of life, embracing changes while treasuring those bright moments that had stitched our lives together. And as I continued to sift through the memories, I began to sense an underlying current of gratitude washing over me. For every laugh, every tear, every shared meal, and every late-night conversation, another layer of light had settled in my heart. Those were not just photographs, but pieces of a life lived fully. They were reminders of love shared, lessons learned, and the inevitable growth that came with time. In that cozy kitchen, time felt elastic, stretching to allow room for reflection. I took a deep breath, inhaling the comforting scent of the peonies as they whispered softly in the breeze, reminding me that though seasons change, beauty always finds its way back. I spent a long moment with my eyes closed, listening to the world outside. The woodpecker had flown away, and now the ever-distant sound of laughter floated in from the yard, lilting and sweet. I opened my eyes slowly, feeling the warmth of the sun once more as shadows danced lightly across the table. I felt an overwhelming urge to close the scrapbook, to wrap it tight in that moment and keep it safe. But I knew the real beauty lay in allowing those memories to breathe, to live on in their own way as I transitioned into this new chapter of my life. Letting go would be like releasing a paper lantern into the night sky. It would drift off into the horizon while remaining forever a part of me, carrying with it all the love and laughter from days gone by. So, with a soft smile and a calm heart, I closed the scrapbook and set it aside gently. I felt the need for some tea, something warm and soothing to accompany the clarity I was starting to find. As I rose, the light framed the kitchen in a golden halo. I moved to the kettle, filling it with water and listening to the gentle splashes accompanied by the comforting whir of the stove, igniting beneath it. The kettle began to hum softly, a nurturing sound that added to the quiet symphony of my cozy home. As I wrapped my hands around the warm mug moments later, I glanced again at the scrapbook resting on the table. The sunlight caught the edge of its cover, making it shimmer slightly, a subtle beauty that reminded me of all the kindness I had stored within it. I let my gaze wander outside, drinking in the sight of the garden that was now bursting at the seams with vibrant colors. I could see the butterflies flitting from flower to flower, dancing effortlessly in the blooming joy of spring. In that moment, I decided to let those thoughts settle like the petals of the peony outside, enjoying their presence while acknowledging that the future held room for new memories. I could feel the gentle tugging in my heart turning into something lighter, more buoyant, as if the warmth from the sun was wrapping around me like a soft blanket. Eventually, as evening began to whisper sweetly through the window, the shadows stretched long and the colors deepened. I took a slow sip of tea, savoring its warmth. I could feel the coolness of the air begin to drift in, bringing with it the peaceful quiet of twilight. I gathered my thoughts in the scrapbook, returning them to their rightful place on the shelf, where they would patiently wait for another moment of reflection. Standing there in the dimming light, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me, for all the people who had been part of my journey, for the memories that had shaped me, and for the moments yet to come. As I settled into my favorite chair, wrapping a soft blanket around my shoulders, the world outside echoed with the soothing sound of crickets serenading the night. A content smile played on my lips as I breathed in deeply, allowing the air to fill my lungs with peace. I closed my eyes and listened, the soft sounds of twilight wrapping around me like a gentle embrace, lulling me into a warm, restful stillness. The daylight faded quietly into the soft embrace of the night, bringing with it the promise of renewal, and I drifted off, letting go of the past while holding on to the warmth of all that I had ever loved. And now, our next story. The air was cool that evening, carrying with it the scent of pine and wood smoke, a comforting embrace that wrapped itself around the small cabin nestled deep in the woods. Soft, muted colors streaked the sky, a gentle gradient of lavender and peach, illuminating the world in a warm glow that made everything feel safe and secure. The world outside was still, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze, distant enough to be soothing rather than disruptive. Inside, I found myself seated at the sturdy wooden table, worn smooth from years of family meals and shared stories. A few candles flickering softly in their holders, casting playful shadows on the walls. The old potbelly stove in the corner radiated welcoming warmth, its crackling fire a steady companion to the silence around me. I held a steaming mug of chamomile tea, its floral notes mixing pleasantly with the earthy aroma of burning wood. Each sip was like unwrapping a small gift, the gentle warmth pooling within me, unraveling the knots I hadn't realized were there. I listened as the sounds of the world merged into the background, my heart feeling heavier yet lighter at the same time. My thoughts drifted to the family gathering that had eluded us for far too long. The kind of gathering you always imagine hosting, but somehow never quite manage to pull off. Yet, there I was, caught in the whirlwind of nervous anticipation, preparing for the arrival of my estranged brother, Simon. As dusk deepened and the stars began to peek through the veil of night, I busied myself with small tasks, trying to ground myself in the familiarity of routine. I arranged a plate of cookies my grandmother had always made for us, their sweet, buttery scent mixing with the comforting air of the cabin. I couldn't help but smile softly to myself, recalling the laughter and playful competition over who could eat the most without feeling sick. It was a memory wrapped in warmth, one that wrapped around me like a well-worn blanket. I breathed in deeply, reminding myself that the past didn't have to define the present. Every step of preparation became a small act of reconciliation as I set the table with care, pulled out the mismatched plates that had been handed down through generations, and layered soft, warm napkins beside each setting. Each detail, a quiet offering, a bridge to span the distance that had grown wide between us. As I gazed out the window, I noticed the silhouette of a figure approaching along the narrow path, framed by moonlight. I felt a flutter of nerves in my stomach, a kaleidoscope of emotions swirling within me. When Simon stepped into the warm glow of the cabin, I could see the familiar contours of his face, shadowed by the years and choices that had brought us to this moment. His eyes, once bright with mischief, now held a cautious warmth, and I felt an odd mixture of joy and apprehension. "Hey, it's been a while," he said quietly, his voice low as if he were afraid of breaking the fragile silence that hung between us. "It has," I replied, my heart quickening slightly. "I'm glad you came." There was a moment of stillness, thick and tangible, as we stood there taking each other in, measuring the space that had stretched between us. He stepped inside, shaking off the last remnants of the cool night air, and I felt a rush of gratitude that he had decided to take this step. We settled into the living room, the flames from the fire crackling gently, their warmth dissolving the awkwardness cloaked around us. As we exchanged small talk, I could sense the deep undercurrents of our previous disagreements, the weight of silence that had long filled the spaces between our words. It felt daunting, but also oddly comforting, as if we were both aware that each moment spent together was a step toward healing, a journey back to where we had once been. The conversation ebbed and flowed, rolling smoothly as we reminisced about our childhood antics, like the time we built an elaborate fort made of blankets and chairs in the living room, only to discover that our parents had a much more elaborate idea. They joined in, chuckling as our fortress crumbled around us, turning the entire affair into a laugh-filled adventure. We laughed at the remembered chaos, the warmth of shared history beginning to knit the frayed edges of our bond back together. With each passing moment, I noticed the lines of tension in Simon's shoulders easing, the way the corners of his mouth lifted almost imperceptibly when he talked about his own adventures over the years. I dared to share gentle thoughts about my life, too, how I had faced quieter trials, how I had grown a little, perhaps. We stood at the threshold of vulnerability, our voices mixing with the soft sounds of the fire, creating a cocoon of warmth around us that wrapped us in its embrace. Then, as if we were both caught in the magic of that evening, I pulled out the plate of cookies, offering him one, while my heart raced at the thought of sharing that small piece of our past. The aroma filled the room, a sweet reminder of home, and he accepted with a grin, the familiar glimmer of mischief shining through. "Just like old times," he remarked, taking a bite, and I could see he had returned, if only for a moment, to the carefree days of our youth. The simple act of sharing cookies transformed that space, along with laughter, into a refuge, a safe haven where we could begin to remember what it meant to be brothers. As the evening deepened, we found ourselves slipping into comfortable silence, the kind that feels like an old sweater, woven from memories and wrapped in warmth. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow that flickered over our faces, illuminating our shared laughter and quiet contemplation alike. Outside, the soft rustle of leaves blended with the gentle patter of night insects, creating a lullaby that wrapped around the cabin. "I've missed this," Simon finally admitted, his voice gentle, tinged with vulnerability. "I miss us. None." And in that moment, I understood that our estrangement had created a gap that felt insurmountable, yet here we were, sitting across from each other, rebuilding that bridge with every shared story, every laugh, each cookie savored in neat silence. Time, I realized, had a way of shifting the edges of things, making space for healing and connection, if only we chose to let it. As the fire began to settle, casting soft embers against the backdrop of night, The atmosphere of the cabin wrapped itself around us like a warm embrace. The weight of unspoken words hung lightly in the air, delicate, and as I looked at Simon, I noticed a softness in his gaze, a willingness to step closer, to return, to mend what had frayed. Hours passed in this tranquil state, filled with stories, laughter, and the comfortable silence of companionship. I felt the night drawing deeper as the shadows danced warmly in the flickering firelight, and my body relaxed into the comforting rhythm of the evening. I could feel myself floating gently, cradled in the warmth of the moment, like a leaf drifting lazily on a still pond. As I leaned back, a yawn emerging unexpectedly from my lips, I surrendered to the tranquility that filled the room. My eyelids grew heavy, and I sensed the world beyond melting away, leaving only the soft glow of the fire, the gentle laughter of a brother I had missed, and the sweet scent of lingering cookies. In that quiet softness, I closed my eyes and felt peace wrap around me like a blanket, knowing that this was a new beginning, as much as it was a return to the warmth of family. It felt right, sweet, and safe, and as I drifted into slumber, I knew we were forging a path back to each other. One shared moment at a time. Take a deep breath, and let's move on to the next one. The air was filled with the soft scent of freshly baked bread, a warm, yeasty aroma that curled around me like a favorite sweater. I sat at my small wooden table, the sun filtering through the kitchen window, casting gentle patterns of light across the worn surface. The chairs, slightly crooked from years of use, creaked softly beneath me as I shifted ever so slightly. Outside, the garden was alive with the buzzing of bees, flitting between the blooming lavender and the sunflowers that swayed lazily in the late afternoon breeze. It was a Saturday in early summer, the kind of day that wrapped itself around you comfortably, with the chirping of birds and the distant laughter of children echoing through the air. I remember how I watched the neighbors' kids play in their yard, their joyful shouts mingling with the scent of mown grass, as a gentle warmth settled over everything. As I sat there, sipping a cup of chamomile tea, I thought of my neighbors, the Richards family next door, and old Mrs. Thompson across the street. It was funny how, despite living so close, we seldom interacted beyond the quick wave or polite nod. Yet, just as the bees relied on the blossoms to thrive, there was a sense that we all needed each other, even in our fleeting exchanges. That summer felt significant for some reason, as if it held the promise of connection. One afternoon, while I was trimming the edges of my lawn, I noticed a flicker of movement from the Richards' yard. Little Sophie, their youngest, had set up what she called a lemonade stand for goodness. With her curly hair bouncing as she hopped from foot to foot, she called to me with a grin that could melt the coldest of hearts. The bright yellow pitcher sat beside her, filled with homemade lemonade that sparkled like summer sunlight. "Would you like some?" she chirped, her voice sweet as honey. I chuckled, appreciating her earnestness. "Of course, Sophie. I could use a refreshment." "None." As I approached, I couldn't help but admire her determination. She had fashioned a sign out of an old piece of cardboard and colored it in with bright crayons, declaring, "Lemonade, 50 cents. For charity." It was charmingly crooked, a testament to her enthusiasm. My heart swelled a little at the sight. We chatted as I took a sip of her lemonade, a perfect blend of sweet and tart that danced on my tongue. "Thank you, Sophie. This is delicious," I said, savoring the coolness on the warm day. "Mr. Jones said he would buy a cup if I made him one too," she exclaimed, her pride shining with every word. As she poured more lemonade for an imaginary customer, I couldn't help but feel my own heart softened by the sheer joy of her innocent ambition. Just then, her older brother Jake wandered over, his skateboard tucked under his arm. He glanced at me, and then at Sophie before tilting his head slightly. "Is she charging you for that?" he teased, a smile breaking across his face. We shared a brief laugh, my affection for the family growing stronger. And in that moment, I realized how small interactions could knit a community together. I promised to stop by later with cookies for Sophie's stand, and she beamed up at me. Over the next few weeks, more neighbors began to join in. It was as if Sophie's small idea had sparked something within all of us. I remember one sunny afternoon, Mrs. Thompson came over, her hair wild and gray like wind-tossed clouds. "I heard there's a lemonade stand over there," she said with a twinkle in her eye. "They'll be needing some cookies, won't they?" Together we baked a batch of oatmeal chocolate chip cookies, the scent wafting through the air, mingling with the lemony sweetness of the stand next door. The moment the first tray came out of the oven, I could almost feel the warmth of community gathering like steam around us. As the weeks drifted by, Sophie's stand became a hub of laughter and connection, bridging the gaps between our homes. We'd gather, each of us bringing something small, a pitcher of lemonade, a plate of cookies, or simply our laughter. We shared stories, and sometimes the little ones would put on impromptu shows, dancing and spinning in the warm glow of the dusky evenings. I remember one night in particular, when the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the grass. The street was lit softly by string lights that Sophie's father had hung from their porch, twinkling like stars above us. We all sat on mismatched chairs, an eclectic collection of old garden furniture, with children running around, their giggles echoing like music in the twilight. Old Mrs. Thompson shared tales of her own childhood summers, her stories weaving through the laughter like a gentle breeze. "Oh, we had bicycle races down the old dirt road," she reminisced, her eyes sparkling with the glow of memory. "We'd ride until our knees ached and then come home to our mother's lemonade, always a treat after a long day." It felt beautiful to connect like this, a shared tapestry made of laughter, memories, and simple acts of kindness. Somewhere along the way, the initial goal of raising money for charity became less important than the gatherings we cherished. The joy had shifted from a standalone event to a cherished ritual. We would sit, talk, and enjoy one another's company, sipping lemonade and nibbling cookies under the soft glow of the lights. Before long, a warm sense of belonging settled among us like an old friend. I realized in those quiet moments that it was never just about lemonade or cookies, but the warmth of community we had built together. As I sat there one evening, feeling the soothing weight of the summer night wrap around me, I understood something profound. We had created a little haven, one where we could share laughter, solace, and connection in a world that often felt so hurried and fast. The gentle hum of conversations, the rustling leaves, and the warmth of the growing friendships cradled me like a soft blanket. As I watched the children chase fireflies, their squeals of delight piercing the warm air, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace settle in my heart. Eventually, the gatherings waned with the setting sun, and as the summer faded into autumn, we all turned our attention to our own lives. But those nights lingered like sweet memories, echoing in my mind like the softest lullaby. Now, every so often I find myself sipping tea at my wooden table, gazing out towards the Richards' yard where Sophie's lemonade stand once stood so proudly. I smile at the thought of those golden days and the warmth that blossomed unexpectedly. A reminder that sometimes all it takes is a simple gesture to bring a community together. And tonight, as I prepare for sleep, I feel grateful for the laughter, the stories, and the cherished connections that remind me of the beauty found in the everyday. I close my eyes, and in my mind's eye, I see twinkling lights, hear the distant sound of children's laughter, and breathe in the warm, sweet scent of summer lemonade. In the quiet of the night, I drift gently into dreams, enveloped in the warmth of those shared moments, knowing that I am home, surrounded by kindness, love, and the essence of community. Close your eyes and settle in for this one. Take a deep breath, and let's move on to the next one. And that's the last story for tonight. You've traveled a long way to get here, through 12 quiet worlds, 12 small lives, 12 gentle resolutions. Your breathing is slower now. Your body is heavy and warm. There's nothing left to think about. Just the quiet. Just the dark. Just rest. Good night.